Is my car ready yet? It's the Studebaker, you know, the one with the little dog in the window that goes back and forth. Carol Burnett made millions of people laugh for 11 straight years. But in 1977, she did something that brought her entire crew to tears. That episode aired only once, but it touched the hearts of viewers everywhere. Critics called it a masterpiece, and it won many awards. But Carol herself never watched it again, not once in 47 years. She said it felt too real. The scene hit so close to her real life that it was painful to see herself in it. So what made one of America's funniest women turn away from her own performance? Carol Burnett was born on April 26, 1933, in San Antonio, Texas. From the start, her life was full of hardship. Both her parents struggled with alcohol addiction and couldn't properly care for her. Her father worked in a movie theater, but he couldn't keep a job. Her mother drank heavily and wasn't emotionally present. Sadly, both of her parents would eventually die from alcohol-related illnesses. Even as a small child, Carol understood what it felt like to be unloved. The people who were supposed to care for her most chose alcohol over her. It was a lonely and unstable world, but Carol discovered that making people laugh helped protect her from falling apart. Eventually, her parents gave up on raising her. Carol was taken in by her grandmother, Mabel White. In 1940, the two of them moved to Hollywood. But it wasn't the glamorous Hollywood people dream of. They lived in a tiny run-down boarding house, sharing one cramped room. Their neighbors were people with their own struggles. Addicts, the mentally ill, and others just trying to survive. Carol and her grandmother lived on only $20 a week, barely enough for food. Despite their poverty, Mabel gave Carol something she'd never had before: unconditional love. Carol was poor, but for the first time, she felt safe. To escape the stress of her life, Carol created a make-believe twin sister named Karen. Karen was everything Carol wished she could be: confident, pretty, always smiling. Carol acted out both roles so convincingly that the other tenants believed Karen was real. She would run up the fire escape, change her clothes and hairstyle, and come back pretending to be Karen. Then a few minutes later, she would return as Carol. It was all pretend, but it brought joy to people who had very little of it. Carol also found comfort at the movies. Every Saturday, she and her grandmother went to see a film. Tickets cost 25 cents for both of them, a big portion of their small weekly budget. But for a couple of hours, Carol could forget about her harsh reality. The movies showed her a world filled with love, happiness, and beauty. She was fascinated by the stars on the screen. But once the movie ended, real life came back fast. They were so poor they couldn't afford basic items like toilet paper. Sometimes, they'd take it from the theater bathroom. It wasn't because they wanted to steal, it was because they were truly in need. Even as a little 7-year-old girl, Carol had already lived through more than most people could imagine. Carol understood what it meant to be hungry, not just for food, but for something more in life. One day, while sitting in a dark movie theater, she heard Johnny Weissmuller's famous Tarzan yell echo through the room. It hit her like lightning. At home, she began copying that yell over and over, trying to get it just right. She didn't know it at the time, but she was actually training her voice. She was building strong breath control, the kind singers spend years learning. What started as a fun game became part of her comedy routine later in life. That Tarzan yell would become one of her trademarks, something that made her live audiences cheer and laugh. By the time she finished high school, Carol had one clear dream: she wanted to be a journalist. Her mother had always wanted to be a writer, and Carol felt like it was her job to fulfill that dream. She set her sights on UCLA. But when it came time to enroll, she hit a hard truth. She didn't have the $50 needed for tuition, which is about $600 today. For most people, that would have been the end. It almost was for her, too. Then, out of nowhere, a stranger stepped in and paid the amount. She never found out who it was. They didn't want anything in return: no thanks, no attention, just enough money to change her future. At UCLA, Carol planned to major in journalism. But one elective theater class changed everything. In that class, Something clicked inside her. She wasn't shy anymore. She wasn't the poor, quiet girl in the corner. She was funny, loud, and alive. Her teachers saw it, and so did the other students. She could sing, act, and make people laugh all in one moment. Journalism started to feel too small for her. She switched her major to theater. It was a big risk, but it was the first time she wasn't just surviving, she was dreaming. That risk paid off. At the end of her freshman year, she was named UCLA's most promising newcomer in theater. It wasn't just an award, it felt like a sign that she was on the right path. It gave her confidence and opened doors. She got better roles and mentors who saw she wasn't just another hopeful actress. She had something special. In 1954, while still in college and working as an usherette for just 65 cents an hour, Carol's life changed again. This time at a party in San Diego. She wasn't there to have fun. She was sneaking food into her purse to bring home to her grandmother. A well-dressed man started talking to her. He wasn't in show business. He was a millionaire shipbuilder from La Jolla. Carol told him she dreamed of going to New York to be on Broadway, but couldn't even afford college tuition. The man made her an incredible offer. $1,000 each for her and her boyfriend Don Soroyan. But he had 3 rules. Never tell anyone his name, only use the money to get to New York, and if they made it, they had to help someone else one day. His wife later said he'd done this kind of thing before. For gas stations, restaurants, and others chasing dreams. With the $2,000, Carol and Don packed their bags and left UCLA behind. Carol had never been farther than Texas, but she wasn't scared. She said, "I didn't know enough to be scared." When they arrived in New York, they stayed at the Algonquin Hotel for $9 a night, which quickly ate up their funds. One night, as she cried while making a collect call home, she felt ready to give up. Then, she heard on the radio that a hurricane named Carol was heading up the coast. She took it as a sign to stay strong. Carol ended up living at the Rehearsal Club, a boarding house for young women trying to make it in the arts. For $18 a week, she shared a room with 4 other girls. There was only 1 closet and 1 bathroom, but to Carol, it was paradise. She'd been sleeping on a couch before. The place was full of energy, with girls practicing lines, singing, and rushing around with colors in their hair. Carol worked nights as a coat check girl and spent her days auditioning. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. In March 1955, the girls at the Rehearsal Club put on a show called the Rehearsal Club Review and invited agents and producers. Even big stars like Marlene Dietrich came. That night changed everything. Her first major break came from a silly love song about the very serious Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles. The song, written by Ken Welch, was a joke, but Carol performed it so perfectly that it became her trademark. It got her on the Jack Paar Show and then the Ed Sullivan Show. On January 6, 1957, she stood on Sullivan's stage with shaking knees. By the end, people were roaring with laughter. In August, she returned to perform the song again, along with a parody of Puppy Love. That ridiculous song made her the talk of New York comedy. Carol spent the next 5 years working hard. She played a ventriloquist dummy's girlfriend on The Paul Winchell Show in 1955, then got a small role on Stanley with Buddy Hackett. It only lasted a year, but in 1959, everything changed when she landed the lead in Once Upon a Mattress, an off-Broadway show that moved to Broadway. Carol played Princess Winifred, a loud, clumsy girl from the marsh, nothing like a typical fairy tale princess. The show became a huge hit and earned her a Tony nomination. On June 22, 1959, exactly 5 years after getting that mysterious loan, Carol and Don paid the money back in full. The millionaire never replied. He remained a mystery. At that point, Carol was making $500 a week, more than she had ever dreamed. Once Upon a Mattress was never meant to be a hit. Critics didn't love it at first, but audiences did. The show ran for 470 performances. But when Carol left in 1960, the show fell apart. Her replacement lasted just 8 performances before it closed. Carol had become irreplaceable. Then came The Gary Moore Show from 1959 to 1962. Carol went from rising star to TV powerhouse. She won her first Emmy in 1962. Her cleaning lady character became a fan favorite. But even more important, she learned how to work with a live audience, which would later become a key part of The Carol Burnett Show. The show also launched stars like Don Knotts and Jonathan Winters. It became one of the most important variety shows ever. For Carol, it was a training ground for timing, character work, and taking big risks. In 1962, something magical happened again. This time at Carnegie Hall. CBS didn't want her to do a special with Julie Andrews. They said Julie wasn't famous enough and Carol was already on TV every week. But after a promo event, the two CBS execs saw Carol struggling to get a taxi. She joked that a truck driver would probably pick her up. And that's exactly what happened. A truck stopped and offered her a ride. The execs took it as a sign and greenlit the show. That special, Julie and Carol at Carnegie Hall, won multiple awards, including an Emmy. The soundtrack even made it to the Billboard charts. Then came the moment that changed everything. On September 11, 1967, The Carol Burnett Show premiered, and television would never be the same. For 11 seasons, the show drew 30 million viewers every week. That wasn't just good, it was history-making. Few shows have ever had such a large, loyal audience. It became more than a comedy show. It became a cultural event. Time magazine called it one of the 100 best shows of all time. TV Guide ranked it at 17, and Variety placed it at 23. But even more than the numbers, the show changed TV forever. It was one of the first variety shows to feature live comedy sketches in front of a studio audience. That format would go on to inspire shows like Saturday Night Live. And Carol Burnett was the first woman to lead it all. Carol Burnett was more than just another famous performer. She changed the entertainment world. She was one of the first women to have her own variety show at a time when television was mostly run by men. Her success made it possible for many women in comedy to follow in her footsteps.